The morning light, a pale, hesitant thing, filtered through the blinds of my small apartment, painting stripes across the stack of servers that hummed a constant, low-thrum the heartbeat of my digital domain. I cradled a mug of cooling chai, the steam a ghost against my spectacles, my gaze fixed not on the city awakening outside, but on the intricate dance of data across my monitors. This was my sanctuary, a quiet corner where logic reigned supreme, and the chaos of the world dissolved into elegant lines of code. For years, I, user Ed, had navigated the labyrinthine arteries of the internet, a cartographer of its hidden pathways, a guardian of its fragile truths. My reputation, built on meticulous precision and an almost clairvoyant ability to anticipate digital threats, was my shield and my identity. OmniCorp, the colossal titan of tech, had once sought my particular brand of quiet genius. I'd spent 2 intense years crafting the very sinews of their Nexus platform, a secure architecture designed to protect their most sensitive data. I left, not with a bang, but with a quiet withdrawal, a disagreement over the ethical implications of their data harvesting practices leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Yet, a part of my digital soul remained etched into their systems, a ghost in the machine I knew better than its current custodians. A single, crimson alert flared on a peripheral screen, a tiny flicker against the usual cascade of green and blue. It was a canary trap, a digital tripwire I'd discreetly woven into the fabric of OmniCorp's external-facing network years ago, a personal alarm for any unauthorized probe directed at my past work. My chai grew colder, forgotten. This was no routine scan. The alert screamed of a deep, invasive presence. My fingers, usually a blur across the keyboard, moved with a sudden, almost surgical slowness. Each keystroke was a deliberate incision into the digital veil. I plunged into the network logs, the raw, unfiltered stream of events. The sheer volume of data was overwhelming, a flood, but my eyes, honed by countless hours, sought patterns, anomalies, the discordant note in a symphony of order. The breach was colossal, not a leak but a gushing torrent. OmniCorp's crown jewels proprietary algorithms, user data, strategic acquisition plans were hemorrhaging into the digital ether. My stomach tightened, a cold knot of dread beginning to form. This wasn't just a hack, it was an act of digital war. And then the breadcrumbs. They appeared, one after another, each a venomous accusation. IP addresses, routing through a chain of forgotten virtual private servers I'd configured years ago for a defunct research project. Log entries bearing my unique, almost signature coding style, a specific way I structured error handling, a peculiar commenting convention I'd always used. A rare, custom encryption key, one I had designed and implemented for a niche internal OmniCorp project, appeared in the attacker's toolkit, a digital fingerprint pointing directly at me. It was too perfect, too precise. My breath hitched. This wasn't random. This was orchestrated. Someone hadn't just breached OmniCorp. They had painstakingly, maliciously framed me for it. My quiet life, my carefully constructed world of logic and order, was dissolving into a nightmare. Then came the final, sickening discovery. The exfiltration endpoint. The stolen data, after traversing a labyrinth of proxies and anonymizers, was making its final hop through a specific, highly unusual satellite uplink. It was an uplink I had configured years ago for a secure, short-term data transfer project involving remote geological surveys, a system designed for absolute anonymity and mobility. A system that had been decommissioned and erased from official records. Its location, according to the metadata, was a fishing boat at sea during transfer. The phrase hung in the air, a phantom accusation. A fishing boat at sea. During transfer. It was a digital ghost from my past, reactivated, repurposed, and now a beacon pointing directly to my culpability. Knew my digital habits, my past projects, my unique methods, with an intimacy that felt like a violation. A sudden, insistent pounding rattled my apartment door, a stark, physical disruption to the digital maelstrom I was trapped within. The rhythmic thud echoed the frantic beat of my own heart. Through the slats of the blinds, I saw the flashing, strobing lights blue and red, painting the quiet street in an urgent, accusing glow. My mind raced, 1,000 calculations, 1,000 possibilities, all converging on a single terrifying truth. They were here, already. The framing was complete. The trap had sprung. The pounding intensified, now accompanied by a stern voice, muffled but clear. "User Ed, open up. We have a warrant." I stared at the screen, at the fishing boat at sea during transfer, at the damning evidence meticulously planted. But beneath it, a spark, hot and defiant, began to glow. They had set me up. Now I would unravel their carefully woven lie. The phantom chill of the screen still clung to my fingertips, a ghostly echo of the fishing boat at sea during transfer, the image, the data, the meticulously forged narrative. It wasn't just evidence. It was a trap, spun with such venomous precision that its threads felt woven directly into the fabric of my own digital identity. My hands, once capable of orchestrating symphonies of code, now felt alien, heavy with a comprehension that turned my stomach to lead. This was not a simple misdirection, nor a clumsy attempt at framing. This was the work of artisans of deceit, each bite a brushstroke in a masterpiece of betrayal. They hadn't merely pointed a finger. They had carved my name into the very weapon used, etched it with an intent that spoke of intimate knowledge, of a patient, predatory watch. My mind, usually a labyrinth of logic and algorithms, began to trace the contours of the impossible. To prove my innocence through conventional channels would be to wrestle with shadows, to argue against an echo chamber pre-tuned to condemn. Every digital breadcrumb I'd ever left, every anonymous forum post, every encrypted chat would be twisted, recontextualized, weaponized. The air in my small space, usually a sanctuary of quiet focus, now felt thick, charged with an invisible current of impending doom. I tried to breathe, but the oxygen seemed to thin. My gaze drifted to the window where the city's ceaseless hum usually offered a comforting backdrop. Tonight, it felt like a distant, indifferent roar. I saw a flicker of blue light far off, then another closer. They weren't just framing me, they were coming for me. Now. There was no time for despair, no space for self-pity. My fingers, though still trembling, found their old rhythm, dancing across the keyboard not to dissect the frame, but to dismantle my own digital presence. I initiated the wipe protocols, a series of pre-programmed scripts designed for precisely this kind of catastrophic event. Files evaporated, drives encrypted themselves into impenetrable fortresses of noise, and my online personas dissolved like smoke. It was a digital suicide, painful but necessary. The distant blue lights intensified, painting the periphery of my vision with an ominous glow. I could hear the faint, rising wail of sirens, not yet focused, but approaching with an undeniable trajectory. I moved with a practiced urgency, grabbing a pre-packed satchel, a ghost bag I'd called it, filled with burner devices, cached data, and a change of clothes from its hidden compartment. Every step was deliberate, every motion a silent prayer for speed. The sirens crescendoed, a mournful, authoritative cry that seemed to rip through the very fabric of the night. A heavy fist hammered against my apartment door, rattling the frame, a violent punctuation mark to my panic preparations. "Open up, law enforcement." A voice boomed, muffled but unmistakable. I didn't pause. My escape route was not through the front. Years ago, a paranoia born of my work had led me to construct a discreet egress through the building's maintenance shafts, leading to an alleyway 3 blocks over. It was a tight squeeze, smelling of dust and forgotten things, but it was my only path to freedom. Emerging into the cool night air of the alley, I felt a fleeting sense of liberation, quickly replaced by the crushing weight of my new reality. My destination was not a safe house, but a series of anonymous waypoints, each chosen for its lack of digital footprint. I melted into the urban sprawl, a solitary figure against the relentless pulse of the city, shedding my old life with every hurried step. My first sanctuary was an abandoned maintenance tunnel beneath the old subway lines, a forgotten artery of the city's past. The air was damp and still, carrying the faint metallic tang of rust and ozone. Here, cloaked in the absolute anonymity of neglect, I pulled out a worn, nondescript laptop and a secure, encrypted drive. The fishing boat at sea during transfer data, the very construct of my downfall, was now my compass. I wasn't looking for ways to deny its existence. I was looking for its true architects. I delved back into the planted evidence, not as the accused, but as the hunter. I peeled back layers of metadata, cross-referenced timestamps, and meticulously dissected the network traffic logs. The initial sweep revealed nothing but perfectly aligned, damning evidence. It was too clean, too flawless. And that, I realized, was the first anomaly. True chaos, true organic hacking always left a smudge, a tell. Then, buried deep within a seemingly innocuous log file, a flicker. A sequence of hexadecimal characters, a mere handful, caught my eye. It was part of a header, a rarely used, almost archaic protocol signature. My mind raced, sifting through years of obscure network knowledge. This specific signature in this context was like a painter's unique brushstroke, an anachronism in the otherwise modern, polished forgery. It wasn't my signature. It wasn't OmniCorp's. The results were sparse, hinting at a very specific, almost legendary group known for their intricate, almost artistic breaches. They called themselves the Weavers, whispered to be architects of digital tapestries so complex they could unravel entire corporations. Their targets were always high value, their methods always elegant, leaving behind only the faintest, most esoteric calling cards. This was it. The first thread, thin as spider silk, leading away from my ruined life and into the labyrinthine depths of their hidden world. They had woven a trap for me, but I would unravel their entire design, one thread at a time. The hunt had truly begun. My every instinct screamed to dismantle it, to unravel the lie, but the real architects remained hidden, their faces obscured by layers of proxies and dead-end connections. I knew then, with a cold certainty that settled deep in my bones, that the answers lay not in the clear light of day, but in the labyrinthine depths where shadows dealt in secrets. My workspace, usually a sanctuary of clean lines and quiet hums, felt like a war room. Monitors glowed with cryptic scripts, their phosphorescent green text a silent language only I understood. I moved with a practiced, almost ritualistic grace, my fingers dancing across the keyboard, each keystroke a deliberate step deeper into the digital underworld. The entry points were familiar, yet each time, a fresh wave of trepidation washed over me. It was like stepping into a vast, unseen ocean, where currents of data could pull I under without a trace. I navigated through layers of encrypted tunnels, past digital guard dogs and honeypots designed to snare the unwary. My digital footprint, carefully masked and fragmented, was a ghost in the machine, leaving no discernible trail. My objective was clear: make contact with the broker, a figure I knew only by a string of shifting pseudonyms, a ghost in the system who specialized in connecting disparate threads, selling information to the highest bidder, or sometimes to whoever offered the most intriguing puzzle. Our paths had crossed once years ago, on a project that now seemed almost quaint in its innocence. I knew the risks. Locating their current persona was an event in itself, a perilous game of digital hide-and-seek. I sifted through fragmented chat logs, obscure forums, and dormant accounts, looking for the subtle tells, the unique digital signature that marked their presence. It took hours, each minute a slow burn of anxiety, until a flicker of recognition caught my eye within a forgotten corner of a long-abandoned data exchange. A single, encrypted message, dated weeks ago, yet only now decrypting for me as if it had been waiting for my specific key. It was an invitation, cryptic and dangerous, to a private channel. The connection established, the silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the hum of my own machines. Then, a message materialized. You seek answers where none are given. Why now? My fingers hovered. The current landscape has shifted. I seek truth where lies have been sown. A pause, longer this time. Truth is expensive, user ed, and often it bites the hand that feeds it. I am prepared to pay, I typed, my resolve hardening, and to bleed if necessary. The next reply was a single, enigmatic word, Cerberus. My breath hitched. Cerberus, not a name I recognized from any public OmniCorp project. It sounded like something whispered in hushed tones, a project shrouded in secrecy. What is Cerberus? I demanded, the words flying from my fingertips. A dog with 3 heads guarding something valuable, the broker responded. They say it was meant to secure the future, but it devoured the past instead. This breach you're entangled in. It's not about data. A forced amnesia. Not about data. The reveal hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't merely corporate espionage or a simple hack for profit. This was something far more sinister, a deliberate erasure, a cover-up designed to bury a truth so profound it required an innocent scapegoat, me, to divert attention. Where do I find this Cerberus? It leaves faint echoes. Ghost data. Look for the ripples where the water should be still. Specifically, in the discarded logs of the original OmniCorp acquisition of etched, specifically, within the dormant servers they kept offline after the merger. There was a hidden archive, an off-book storage solution for legacy data. A peculiar choice for a company so focused on the future. They called it Project Chronos, and Cerberus was its guardian. The connection dissolved as abruptly as it had formed. Project Chronos, etched, legacy data. The pieces were beginning to align, not into a simple picture, but into a vast, complex mosaic of corporate malfeasance. The broker's words spurred me to action. I knew where to look. Old acquisition files, often overlooked, full of redundant data, the perfect place to hide a secret. I began my dive into the archived records of the etched acquisition. It was a tedious, mind-numbing task, sifting through millions of lines of code, financial reports, and communication logs. Most of it was digital dust, but I was looking for the ripples, the anomalies. Hours blurred into a singular focus, my eyes scanning, my mind racing. Then, buried deep within a seemingly innocuous legal disclaimer document, embedded within the hexadecimal data of a forgotten image file, I found it. A block of encrypted text, far too large and complex to be mere metadata. It wasn't just a hidden message. It was a vault. My fingers trembled as I initiated the decryption sequence, the glowing progress bar a slow, agonizing crawl towards an unknown truth. The weight of Cerberus pressed down on me, a monstrous secret waiting to be unearthed. The word Cerberus coiled in my mind like a viper, its scales glinting with a dangerous truth. Project Chronos, etched, legacy data. The pieces were no longer scattered shards, but a vast, complex mosaic of corporate malevolence, its edges sharp with deceit. My breath hitched in the quiet of my temporary sanctuary. This wasn't merely a frame-up. It was a carefully orchestrated demolition, and I, user ed, was meant to be the collateral damage, the convenient scapegoat. etched, a forgotten subsidiary, held the key. Its legacy systems, surely neglected, a digital graveyard where secrets might still whisper. But access, direct and untraceable, was paramount. My usual ghosting methods wouldn't suffice. This required a physical conduit, a blind spot in the omnipresent gaze of the corporation. A message, encrypted and terse, had arrived an hour after the Cerberus revelation, a single coordinate, a time, and the instruction: bring nothing but my need. The journey to the rendezvous was a blur of shadowed streets and hushed anticipation. I felt eyes on me, or perhaps it was just the phantom weight of paranoia, a constant companion since this nightmare began. The air grew damp, tasting of salt and diesel as I neared the docks, the skeletal fingers of cranes reaching into the bruised twilight sky. A small, nondescript vessel, its paint peeling like old skin, bobbed gently against the pier, cloaked in the gloom, motioned me aboard. The engine rumbled to life, a low growl beneath my feet as we slipped away from the shore, the city lights receding into a distant shimmer. The captain, a taciturn individual whose face was a roadmap of sun-baked lines, steered us into the open water. The speaker, a lean figure with eyes that seemed to hold the depth of the ocean itself, extended a small, ruggedized USB drive. "This is a key, not a map. It will open a door, but the labyrinth beyond is my own to navigate." I took the drive. The figure offered a grim smile. "A guardian, or perhaps a jailer. It depends on which side of the gate I stand." No more words were exchanged. The boat turned, heading back towards the distant glow of civilization. The transfer was complete. I was left with a tool, a riddle, and the vast, indifferent expanse of the ocean. Back in my hidden space, the drive pulsed with latent energy. I connected it to a shielded terminal, a machine I'd built for moments precisely like this, insulated from the prying tendrils of the network. The drive contained a single, self-executing script, a bespoke tunneling tool designed to exploit a specific, deeply buried vulnerability in Ethicom's ancient network architecture. A vulnerability only a true insider, or someone with profound knowledge of its genesis, could have crafted. The script initiated, a cascade of green text scrolling across the screen, establishing a clandestine bridge. I navigated through layers of rusted protocols, defunct security measures, and data archives dating back decades. This was less a network and more an archaeological dig. Then I found it. Not a single file, but a fragmented data stream, cleverly disguised within what appeared to be routine system logs from Ethicom's final years of operation. The stream, when reassembled, revealed encrypted communications, internal memos, and project outlines. The name Project Kronos appeared repeatedly, not as an external threat or a competitor's initiative, but as an internal, highly classified OmniCorp venture operating under the Ethicom umbrella. My breath hitched. The breach wasn't just on OmniCorp, it was by OmniCorp. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The data breach, the one I was framed for, was a smokescreen. Its true purpose was to obscure, to erase, to misdirect. Someone within OmniCorp had used the chaos of a data breach to access, manipulate, or perhaps even delete sensitive legacy data related to Project Kronos. And I, User Ed, the brilliant outsider, was the perfect patsy. The communications hinted at a phased rollout and containment protocols for Kronos. And then, a series of directives, dating just months before the OmniCorp breach, explicitly mentioning Cerberus activation and legacy data purging. Cerberus wasn't a collective. It was an internal security measure, a cleanup crew, perhaps even the core mechanism of Project Kronos itself, designed to guard or enforce its secrets. OmniCorp wasn't just a powerful tech conglomerate. It was a leviathan, its tentacles reaching into its own forgotten past, willing to sacrifice its own public image and an innocent life to bury a secret. The scale of this deception, the sheer audacity of framing me to cover their own tracks, was staggering. I was up against the full, unyielding might of OmniCorp itself, a corporation that considered human lives expendable in the pursuit of its undisclosed agenda. The salt spray was a cold caress, sharp against my skin as the fishing boat at sea during transfer cut through the rolling waves. The air tasted of brine and diesel, a stark contrast to the sterile hum of the servers I usually navigated. Below deck, the rhythmic groan of the hull was a constant, unsettling companion. I sat hunched over a battered laptop, the cool, heavy drive from the figure nestled beside it. A guardian, or perhaps a jailer, their words echoed, a riddle whispered on the wind. This drive, this small metal rectangle, was my last hope. I plugged it in, the USB port a familiar gateway into the unknown. The screen flickered to life, the operating system a bespoke creation, a labyrinth designed to deter the casual glance. My eyes, however, were trained for such mazes. I bypassed the initial layers with practiced ease, each keystroke a silent prayer. The drive hummed, a low vibration against the table. Then a directory structure blossomed on the screen, cryptic file names hinting at their secrets. My gaze snagged on a folder labeled Project Cerberus. The name, fresh in my memory, sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the sea air. Within, a trove of data. Schematics, communication logs, and internal memos. The memo dated back 2 years, predating the breach by a significant margin. This wasn't just a system. It was a weapon, capable of isolating and manipulating data streams with unprecedented control. It was designed to be impervious, a digital fortress with 3 heads, just like its mythical namesake. My mind raced. OmniCorp had blamed me for a breach that, by the looks of it, was orchestrated within their own Cerberus system. The implications were enormous. If I could prove OmniCorp built and used this system to frame me, the entire narrative would shatter. The true perpetrators weren't external hackers, they were architects of deceit, hiding behind their own fortified walls. A sudden, violent lurch of the boat nearly sent the laptop flying. My grip tightened. Rough seas, a voice rumbled from the companionway. It was the grizzled captain, his face etched with sun and wind. Storms brewing. The metaphor was not lost on me. I needed to act fast. I tried to reach the figure who'd given me the drive. My satellite phone, a secure model, chirped twice, then connected. It was the lead detective, sharp and unyielding. User Ed, the detective's voice cut through the static, oddly calm. We've located my associate. He's assisting us with our inquiries, and we have a trace on his last known communication. The figure was compromised. A sudden, sharp pain lanced through my chest. Betrayal or simply captured. It didn't matter. My ally, my tenuous link to the truth, was gone, swallowed by the very system I sought to expose. And now they knew I was on a boat. The fishing boat at sea during transfer was no longer a sanctuary, it was a trap. My eyes darted to the laptop. The Cerberus data, my evidence, was still there, but a new icon had appeared in the corner of the screen. A small, blinking red dot. A tracker. They had exploited the drive itself, using my attempt to communicate as a vector. Panic clawed at my throat. I had to delete the tracker, wipe any trace of my presence from the drive, but more importantly, I had to save the Cerberus data. It was too large to transfer quickly, and the connection was unstable. The boat pitched again, more violently this time. A deep thrumming sound vibrated through the hull, not the engine. Another vessel, closer. I was cornered. The captain's warning of a storm now felt like a prophecy. I had moments, not minutes. My ally was captured. The data I needed was immense, and my location was compromised. I could try to save the entire Cerberus archive, risking capture, or I could extract only the most critical, incriminating fragments, ensuring my survival but potentially losing the bigger picture. The moral dilemma was stark, brutal. If I stayed to download everything, I would likely be caught. If I fled with only fragments, I might clear my name, but the full extent of OmniCorp's deception, the full scope of Project Cerberus, would remain hidden, my captured allies' sacrifice in vain. My gaze fell upon a particular file, Project Chimera Phase 3 Deployment Log. Chimera, another mythical beast. My mind made the connection. Cerberus was the guardian, Chimera must be the attack. This was the smoking gun. It was smaller, more focused. A desperate plan solidified. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a blur of motion. I initiated a rapid extraction of the Chimera log and its associated subdirectories, ignoring the vast, enticing bulk of the Cerberus archive. It was a gamble, a sacrifice of comprehensive truth for immediate survival. The screen glowed, a progress bar inching forward with agonizing slowness. I was choosing to save myself, to save some of the truth, even if it meant abandoning the rest and perhaps abandoning the figure to their fate. The taste in my mouth was bitter, a mix of salt and regret. This was the only path forward, a desperate sprint into the heart of the storm. The rhythmic thrum of the fishing boat at sea during transfer was a cruel lullaby, each rise and fall of the deck a stark reminder of my exposed position. My ally compromised. My location, a whispered secret, now screamed across the digital ether. The cold hand of dread, once a phantom, now gripped my lungs, stealing breath. I pressed my back against the rough, salt-encrusted bulkhead of the small cabin, the smell of diesel and stale fish clinging to the air like a shroud. This vessel, my temporary refuge, had become a cage. its walls thinning with every passing wave. The laptop, my digital lifeline, glowed faintly in the cabin's dimness, reflecting the anxious flicker in my eyes. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. The previous plan, a delicate ballet of misdirection and proxy servers, was shattered. Now I needed a hammer, a direct, brutal, and utterly reckless strike. My fingers, surprisingly steady, danced across the keyboard. The boat's satellite internet connection was a fragile thread, thin and slow, but it was all I had. I needed to pierce OmniCorp's hardened shell, not through a back door but through the front gate, and make off with enough proof to drown them. This wasn't about clearing my name anymore. It was about tearing down the edifice of their lies before it crushed me. I pulled up the interface for my ChronoSync injector. It was a tool born of late-night caffeine and a perverse fascination with temporal vulnerabilities in network protocols. Designed to exploit micro-timing discrepancies in server responses, it was meant for theoretical research, not for a high-stakes corporate espionage raid from a bobbing fishing boat. But desperation bred innovation. The injector would create a brief, almost imperceptible window, a ghost in the machine, allowing me to bypass OmniCorp's primary firewall before their intrusion detection systems could register my presence. It was a digital suicide run, but the only path left. The screen filled with cascading lines of green text, a frantic waterfall of data. Each line was a pulse, a heartbeat against the digital behemoth I sought to conquer. The boat lurched, throwing my hand against the touchpad, but I recovered quickly, my focus absolute. The ChronoSync injector began its work, sending out precisely timed packets, a rhythmic digital drumbeat against the firewall's defenses. It felt like trying to pick a lock with a feather while riding a bucking bronco. The connection lagged, each delay a tiny knife twist in my gut, amplifying the tension. Then, a subtle shift, a momentary hesitation in the data stream. The injector had found its seam. I was inside. OmniCorp's internal network was a labyrinth of nested servers and encrypted directories. I navigated the digital corridors, each folder a potential trap, each access log a potential witness. My custom-built scraper tools whirred, sifting through mountains of data, searching for the specific patterns, the unique fingerprints of a clandestine project. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The hum of the boat's engine, the slap of waves against the hull, faded into a distant murmur. My world was the glowing screen, a universe of ones and zeros. I bypassed a heavily encrypted subdomain, its name a series of innocuous characters, OMNIPROCSSES7. My instincts screamed, this was it. Inside, nestled among legitimate operational files, I found it, a hidden directory, password protected with a simple, yet utterly unexpected key, a date. Not a birthday, not an anniversary, but the exact date of the OmniCorp data breach. I entered the date and the folder opened. My breath hitched. There, among several other files, was a document titled Project Chimera Ledger, Inc. The reveal hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a project, it was a financial record. A ledger detailing payments, shell corporations, and coded directives. And there, stark and undeniable, was an entry, User ED Framing Phase 1 Activation. It wasn't just a data breach. It was a meticulously orchestrated frame-up designed to achieve specific, sinister corporate goals. The ledger implicated a high-ranking OmniCorp executive, referred to only by the code name Ares, as directly approving disbursements, and overseeing it all, mentioned repeatedly in the notes, was the architect. As I initiated the download, a sudden, jarring alert flashed across my screen. A digital intrusion. My ghost in the machine was no longer unseen. Identity traced. Curious choice of entry, little ghost. My blood turned to ice. It was the architect. The key operative, the mastermind behind my digital crucifixion, was here now in this very space. I've walked into a very elaborate web, user ed. Did I truly believe I could untangle it alone? A digital avatar, a stylized, geometric representation of a hooded figure, flickered into existence on the corner of my screen. It was a projection, a digital mask, but its implied gaze felt as real as any physical stare. This was the face-to-face, a silent, nerve-shredding confrontation across thousands of miles of fiber optics and satellite relays. My fingers flew, canceling the download, rerouting, scrambling the data packets, trying to buy precious seconds. The ledger was nearly complete, but the architect was closing in, a digital predator sensing its prey. I couldn't respond, couldn't engage. Every second spent typing was a second lost to their digital dragnet. My ally spoke highly of I. They had interrogated my ally. They knew. The download bar crawled, agonizingly slow. I had to sever the connection now, but not before I had the evidence. I watched the progress bar, a digital hourglass, as the architect's trace protocols intensified, their digital tendrils weaving tighter around my connection. This ends here, user Ed. The last byte of the ledger transferred. In a split second, I executed a pre-programmed kill switch, wiping my temporary footprints, severing the satellite link with a brutal digital snap. My chest heaved, the air thick with the metallic tang of fear and triumph. I had the ledger. I had the proof. But they knew I had it. And they knew where to find me. As if on cue, the boat's engine sputtered, coughed, and died. And then through the small, porthole-like window, I saw it. A distant, powerful searchlight cutting through the pre-dawn gloom, growing steadily brighter on the horizon. My time was up. The cabin was a void, save for the faint emergency light casting a sickly yellow sheen on the bulkhead. The digital snap of the severed satellite link still echoed in my ears, a phantom sound, a brutal memory. My hands, cold and trembling, hovered over the keyboard, the ghost of the ledger's final byte, a vivid afterimage on my mind's eye. I was on a fishing boat at sea during transfer, adrift in more ways than one, but no longer without leverage. The core data, the heart of OmniCorp's rot, was mine. A profound weariness settled over me, heavy as the damp sea air. Every nerve screamed for rest, for the oblivion of sleep, but the fight was far from over. This was merely the end of the beginning. The next phase, the exposure, was the most perilous. I had gathered the pieces. The shell corporations, the illicit data harvesting protocols, the manipulated stock reports, the irrefutable evidence of the frame-up itself, all meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced. The digital fingerprints of the true culprits, the architects of this corporate deception, were now undeniable. My fingers, though stiff, moved with practiced precision. The emergency light was a beacon, but also a target. The rocking of the boat was a constant, unsettling rhythm, a reminder of my isolation, yet also my freedom. No land-based network could track me here, not yet. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal, but it was the only path to absolution. I would not just clear my name. I would detonate the truth, scatter its fragments across the digital winds, making it impossible to ignore or suppress. I had prepared a multi-vector payload, designed to bypass OmniCorp's formidable firewalls and media suppression tactics. It would hit a constellation of independent journalists, whistleblowing platforms, and public forums simultaneously, timed to coincide with a critical market announcement OmniCorp was slated to make. The contrast, I hoped, would be devastating. I began to assemble the final package. Each encrypted file, each time-stamped log, each internal memo I'd painstakingly exfiltrated, was a nail in OmniCorp's coffin. I thought of the executive who had orchestrated my downfall, the security chief whose incompetence or complicity had facilitated the breach, the senator whose legislative influence had paved the way for OmniCorp's unchecked expansion. Their roles, once shrouded in corporate opacity, would soon be starkly illuminated for the world to see. A faint hum vibrated through the hull, a distant thrumming that was alien to the gentle lapping of the waves. My head snapped up, senses on high alert. A motor, too powerful for a small fishing vessel. My breath hitched. They were coming. OmniCorp's hounds, or perhaps law enforcement, hot on the trail of the satellite burst. My window of opportunity was shrinking fast. Time to accelerate, I muttered, my voice hoarse, barely audible over the growing thrum. Adrenaline surged, chasing away the fatigue. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a blur of motion in the dim light. I initiated the final encryption sequence, bundling the entire archive into a self-executing, self-propagating packet. This wasn't just a leak. It was a digital epidemic designed to spread through OmniCorp's own compromised infrastructure, turning their network against them. The hum grew louder, more distinct, cutting through the ocean's murmur. It was a patrol boat, perhaps a corporate security vessel, its engines churning the water with aggressive purpose. I could almost feel its vibrations through the very structure of my small craft. Panic threatened to claw its way up my throat, but I forced it down. Not now, not when I was so close. A new element to the plan solidified in my mind. A direct message, embedded within the core data, addressed to the Chief Executive Officer of OmniCorp. A digital confrontation, a final, defiant roar from the depths of the sea. It would explain, in stark, undeniable terms, the extent of their deception and the depth of my resolve. It would be my manifesto, my declaration of innocence and their indictment. I typed furiously, crafting the message, each word a hammer blow against their edifice of lies. Your empire, built on stolen data and shattered lives, crumbles today. The sound of the approaching vessel was undeniable now, a low growl that filled the air. Headlights, piercing the pre-dawn gloom, swept across the water, then caught the side of my boat, illuminating its worn hull in a harsh, white glare. I was found. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. One last command. One final, irrevocable action. My thumb hovered over the execute key. The system confirmed the target addresses, the timed release, the self-wiping protocols. A voice, amplified by a loudspeaker, boomed across the water, distorted but clear. This is OmniCorp security, prepare to be boarded, identify myself. No time for second thoughts, no time for fear, only the fierce, burning conviction that this had to be done. My finger descended, firm and unyielding. A flood of data, a digital tsunami, erupted from my small terminal, riding the last vestiges of the satellite link I had re-established for this singular purpose. It was gone, launched into the ether, a cascade of truth destined to dismantle a kingdom of deceit. The blinding beam of a powerful spotlight hit the cabin window, momentarily searing my vision. Boots thudded on the deck above, heavy and purposeful. The door to the cabin rattled, then burst open, revealing the silhouettes of two large figures, guns raised, framed against the dazzling light from outside. I sat there, hands resting lightly on the cold keyboard, a ghost in the machine, a whisper in the storm. My name was clear. The truth was out. The battle was won, even if the war for my freedom had just begun. I had done it. The thrum of the fishing boat's diesel engine was a blunt counterpoint to the oceanic quiet, a mechanical heartbeat against the vast, indifferent pulse of the waves. My finger, still tingling with the ghost of a press, recoiled from the keyboard. The screen, once a furious waterfall of binary, now displayed only a static, blinking cursor, a tiny, innocuous beacon in the profound silence. We were on a fishing boat at sea during transfer, a fragile vessel swallowed by the enormity of the dark water, miles from any shore that would recognize my name. The air tasted of salt and diesel, a raw, primal tang that cut through the lingering adrenaline. I felt hollowed out, an empty vessel after pouring every ounce of my being into that final, desperate act. Had it been enough? Had the flood of truth I unleashed found purchase, or would it simply dissipate into the digital ether, another lost message in a sea of noise? The captain, a grizzled figure whose eyes held the wisdom of countless sunrises over the water, glanced at me from the helm, a silent question in his weathered gaze. I could offer no answer, only a shrug that felt as heavy as stone. Days blurred into a liquid haze. The fishing boat at sea during transfer became a temporary sanctuary, a rocking cradle of nervous anticipation. News. At first, a distant murmur began to filter through the boat's crackling radio. Static-laced voices spoke of unprecedented data leaks, of corporate malfeasance on a global scale, of OmniCorp stock plummeting. Each fragmented report was a hammer blow, resonating deep within me, a terrifying confirmation that my digital tsunami had indeed struck shore. The initial reports were chaotic, a cacophony of speculation and outrage. Then, the details began to coalesce. The encrypted logs I had painstakingly extracted, the communication transcripts, the financial ledgers detailing illicit transfers and shell corporations, all of it, a meticulously woven tapestry of deceit, was now unraveling in the harsh glare of public scrutiny. The executive who had spearheaded the frame-up, the security chief who had manipulated the system, even the board members who had tacitly approved the scheme, their roles were laid bare. The news anchors, their voices grave, described the swift, brutal downfall of OmniCorp, a titan brought to its knees not by a rival, but by the very rot within its core. The world watched, aghast, as the empire crumbled. My exoneration came not with fanfare, but with the quiet hum of a satellite phone on the boat. It was the detective, his voice stripped of its usual clipped authority, tinged instead with a weary respect. He spoke of the irrefutable evidence I had provided, of how it had cut through the noise like a laser. My name, once whispered in connection with the breach, was now cleared, but there was a caveat, a shadow of lingering tension. I operated outside the lines, user Ed, he had said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. There are consequences for that, even when the cause is just. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. A fitting backdrop for the storm of emotions within me. Cleared, yes, but irrevocably changed. My life, once a quiet symphony of code and logic, was now a discordant echo of public scrutiny and the unsettling awareness of what I was truly capable of. The detective's words resonated. Consequences. Even on the quiet deck of the fishing boat at sea during transfer, miles from the chaos I had wrought, I felt the phantom weight of them. The world now knew my name, or at least the legend of the phantom hacker who had dared to challenge giants. That knowledge was both a shield and a target. A few days later, back on land in a nondescript rented room, a quiet knock announced a government agent. His demeanor was calm, his eyes sharp, assessing. He didn't offer congratulations, only a direct proposition. My skills, user Ed, are unique. We could use someone who understands their contours. He spoke of a different kind of justice, one that operated in the gray, away from headlines and public fanfare. My mind raced, weighing the cost of a normal life against the undeniable pull of purpose. To turn away now felt like a betrayal of the truth I had fought so hard to uncover. I stepped out later, the city air a stark contrast to the ocean breeze. The world was still spinning, but the axis had shifted. OmniCorp was a memory, a cautionary tale. My past was a shattered mirror, reflecting a life I could no longer return to. Yet, looking up at the vast expanse of the night sky, a canvas dotted with distant, indifferent stars, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The tension remained, a tight knot in my gut, but it was no longer the tension of fear, but of anticipation. The lines between right and wrong, between law and justice, had blurred, and I had walked that precipice. My journey was far from over. It was merely taking a new, uncharted course, guided by the quiet resolve to ensure that some truths, once revealed, could never again be buried.